Hello, YouTube. In the past, in the recorded history, there were anomalies or strange phenomena that are difficult to explain. From ancient chronicles and drawings dating back to the year of 1230, there were a lot of strange things that seem to be fiction now, but they were recorded. So everything that you will learn next, we know from ancient sources. How much of this really happened that way, we can only guess. But based on my research, something unusual did take place and caused much grief to our planet. And, when you know things like this, you can think about maybe future prevention or what steps we can take to forewarn ourselves. Anyway, it all started in the beginning of the month of April of 1230, and lasted, as far as I know, based on my research, to the beginning of August. In Russia, for example, it rained every day, and allegedly the rain did not stop at all. Further, it is known that in the same year, in May, when allegedly there were endless rains, there was a strong earthquake that damaged many buildings. The earthquake was felt from Novgorod to Kiev. Still the same year, 1230, in the afternoon on May 14, the sun began to disappear abruptly. Everyone lost sight of it. After that, something incredible happened. Pillars of light appeared, red, blue, and green in color. Also, a few days before, the inhabitants of Russia noted that the sun had a triangular shape. Moreover, in the images, the sun is also drawn exactly the right triangular shape. It should be understood that all this information, again, is known to us from various chronicles of 1230. In theory, rains and an earthquake could occur due to some kind of activity in space, and we'll look at it. As we know, the nearest planets are closely connected and affect the Earth in a direct way. And of course, there are celestial bodies, natural and otherwise, flying in and out the atmosphere of our planet. It is difficult to find an explanation for the triangular sun. But on the other hand, we still don't know everything about outer space. So who knows what could have happened about 800 years ago. Is there any other confirmation of the events? Yes, here's an example. When the sun vanished shortly after rising early in the morning over Europe in the year 1230, local workers apparently thought little of it. They just went back to bed, according to historian Roger of Wendover. And he added that the same workers were astonished when the sun regained its normal brightness within an hour. So Roger of Wendover, who died in the year of 1236, he was probably a native of Wendover in Buckinghamshire, and he was an English chronicle of the 13th century. In the year 6738 from the creation of the world, or 1230 according to modern chronology, old Russian chronicles and European written sources record an extreme number of natural disasters. Several years of drought were abruptly replaced by years of extremely wet and cold weather. So California should take heed. Cold rains covered the whole of Europe for several years, and that caused crop failures and the reign of pestilence for about 17 years. So we know that in Russia in 1230, again, it rained non-stop from April, that's according to the new calendar, to the end of July or August 2nd, the new style. And God was angry and laid waste to earth, and it rained from the day of the Annunciation to Elijah's day, day and night. And the cold came, and there were severe frosts, and all the bread froze. I think they refer to the crops. and they bought the bread for 8 kuna and a quarter of rye for 20 hryvnias in Novgorod. And in some empty rural places, a quarter of rye was bought for 30 hryvnias, and wheat for 40 hryvnias of Novgorod, and millet for 50 hryvnias of Novgorod, and oats for a quarter of 12 hryvnias. And there was a great pestilence among the people from hunger, so they could not bury them. Among other things, the ancient Russian chronicles contain information about that strong earthquake in Russia that occurred. Here the date is May 3rd, 1230. Again, the earthquake was observed in a large span of territory. The largest chronographic work of ancient Russia and the whole of medieval Europe, I'm told, the Facial Chronicle Index, created in the 16th century on the Alexandrovskaya Sloboda, tells about these events. All these events together paint a picture that is associated with some cosmic incidents that occurred on our planet. As it turned out, in scientific historiography, it is customary to associate this large-scale cataclysm with the probable eruptions of a large volcano in the Iceland area. According to this theory, the ash ejected by the volcano caused the effect of volcanic winter, pollution of the atmosphere by ash, resulting in cooling due to anti-greenhouse effect. However, proponents of this theory overlook a number of chronicle facts that do not fit into this explanation. Firstly, the epicenter of the earthquake recorded by the chronicles on the territory of ancient Russia could not possibly be in Iceland. Otherwise, Western Europe should have been completely in ruins. Secondly, the effect of the volcanic winter had to be accompanied by long periods of dense clouds with characteristic precipitation, ash fallout, which was not noted by the chronicles. On the contrary, written sources clearly indicate an abnormal amount of cold, incessant rains. Thirdly, let's pay attention and fix an important chronological fact reflected in the sources for further disclosure of the topic. Torrential rains and cooling begin from the day of the Annunciation, that is more than a month before the earthquake on May 3rd. And fourthly, there are still a number of recorded anomalous atmospheric phenomena which it seems extremely difficult to link with a volcanic eruption or its consequences. So there was an interesting hypothesis that I want to mention. Apparently in 1230, the Earth passed through the tail of an unknown comet whose orbit lay between the Sun and our planet. As you know, the main substances in the composition of comets are ice, gas, and fine dust. Approaching the Sun, the comet warms up and forms a tail, a cloud of matter directed away from the Sun under the influence of solar wind pressure. In March of 1230, the substance of the comet's tail begins to penetrate the Earth's atmosphere, filling it with ice crystals, which give rise to prolonged cold rains. After a month and a half, the comet approaches the point of maximum approach to the Earth. Apparently, a relatively large fragment of a comet falls to Earth on May 3rd, somewhere in the expanses of the Russian plain, generating a powerful earthquake in a geologically inactive region from Novgorod to Kiev. On May 10, residents of the city of Vladimir observe a false sunrise in an atmosphere saturated with ice crystals. May 14 is the day of the maximum approach to our planet. The nucleus of the comet eclipses the solar disk. The eclipse is observed over a vast area. In the Kiev area, the fall of a second relatively small fragment is recorded, which burns up in the atmosphere and falls in the Dnieper River. By the end of July, the icy rains stop. The comet is moving away from our planet. In the same chronicle, in the period from 1223 to 1232, we find several mentions of comets. A star called a spear appeared, stretching from east to west in the form of a spear, and it was more than 17 days, foreshadowing the invasion of godless Moabites into Russia for our sins, which came true. We'll discuss the Moabites later. And the periods following them, torrential rains with cold spells. In the same year, it rained incessantly, day and night, from the day of the Transfiguration to Nicolin's day. In the same autumn, there was a flood, big beyond measure. Lakes and rivers overflowed, and the big water in Lake Ilmень froze. And they took out more ice than usual in Volkhov and broke down the links of the 9th big bridge. It can be assumed that all these comments were fragments of a single body that once fell apart in the period from 1223 to 1232, passed near the earth. Of course, the author of this hypothesis that I just presented expressed a very interesting and explanatory hypothesis. But there are also points on it that need clarification. In any case, we thank him for his work. But and there are really no other hypotheses out there. Who is studying the period of history more than 800 years ago, except for some professors in some small colleges? But I think we should pay attention to such disasters. So let's look at the hypothesis presented, and I just want to say it's not difficult to assume that these events had serious consequences for ancient Russia. Famine begins in Russia, especially in the north. In the chronicles, we find reports of a terrible famine in Novgorod, Pskov, Smolensk. Thus, the Pskov Third Chronicle reports, in the summer of 1230, the frost broke to the crops and a prolonged famine came again. As there was no Nicolin day like this, people died in the street and there is no one to bury them, but dogs ate them, like they ate cattle that died. So the summer of 1230 was very cold, and on September 14, frost beat abundantly in all Russian lands except Kiev. As a result of the crop failure, more than 3,000 people died of hunger in Novgorod, and 32,000 people were buried in mass graves in Smolensk. And designating Kiev here as the Russian territory, we're speaking about ancient Rus, the designation of the Slavic land at the time. So I'm not going to get in political discussions. I just want you to understand what took place more than 800 years ago. Let us look at some excerpts from the Russian chronicles, how the hypothesis author interpreted them and how I view them. Here's what the author summarized. On the 10th day of May, some saw the sun rise early in the morning, and it was triangular. Then it stayed a little like a star and disappeared in this form. Then it rose in its usual form or shape. On the 14th day of May, at the 3rd hour of the day, the sun began to disappear in front of all people, and there was not much of it left. And it was like a 3-day month, and it began to grow again. Many thought that it was a month moving across the sky, since there was a full moon then. Others thought that it was the sun going backwards, since small patches of clouds from the north side were moving rapidly towards the sun in the south side. On the same day and hour, it was the same, and even more terrible in Kiev. The sun became a month in front of everyone, meaning the sun became it was changing the form, and red, green, and blue pillars appeared on both sides of it. Fire also descended from the sky like a large cloud onto the Libet stream, you can call it brook. People were all saying goodbye to their lives, and they thought that the end had already come. And they began to kiss each other and ask for forgiveness. And they wept bitterly, and all cried out to God with tears. The all-merciful God carried that terrible fire through the whole city without harm. And it fell into the Dnieper river, and there it disappeared. This was told to us by eyewitnesses who were also there at the time. Let's analyze. The sun rose in the morning and it was triangular, then disappeared, then it rose in its usual form or shape. This narrative describes as accurately as possible a rare atmospheric phenomena called the false sunrise, one of the types of optical phenomenon called halo. As a rule, the halo can be observed only in winter and frosty days, since its occurrence requires a high concentration of ice crystals in the upper layers of the troposphere, which create this beautiful and unusual light effect. Consequently, on May 10, 1230, the Earth's troposphere was filled with ice crystals. Well, if this is a halo effect, then why did this triangular sun rise earlier than usual? And why is it not described later that there were two more suns next to that sun? The halo effect suggests exactly this. If I am wrong, let the physicists correct me. I am also confused by the phrase in the Chronicle that such a triangular sun was in the sky like a star, that is, changed its shape and then disappeared. But when the sun usually rose, there should have been two more next to it, as the halo effect suggests. And this is not described in the Chronicle. Or what? They described one part of the halo and the other two parts they did not, because this is so clear to everyone. So what was it? Or when the sun rose, these crystals in the atmosphere had already evaporated? Next, fire also descended from the sky like a large cloud onto the Libet stream. The hypothesis author thinks there is no doubt that this is an obvious description of the fall of a meteor body. Well, yes, obviously the fall of some body. But if it was like a big cloud, can you imagine what this body was supposed to do in Kiev or to Kiev? But the Chronicle says that that is the fire, did not cause any harm by this fall and fell exactly into the Dnieper River. And they don't even talk about overflowing water, due to the fall. This is extremely strange. And yet the fire descended on the Libet stream, and it is not clear what it means, because further it is said that it passed through Kiev and fell into the Dnieper River. If this is a falling cosmic or celestial body, then how can it first fall in one place and then change its trajectory and fall to another place? I wonder what really fell down in the city where I was born, in ancient Kiev, over 800 years ago, when it's supposed to have fallen down. All I know is, not long after that, the Mongols invaded Russia, lands around Ukrainian lands and Eastern Europe, as well as other territories. And I don't connect the two events together, that one was a warning to the invasion that was coming. That's completely different. We're speaking about events that can be explained in a natural way. If you include into the natural way celestial guests who come to our planet uninvited or have disastrous landings and such, your guess is as good as mine. But all I wanted to let you know is that something very unusual happened more than 800 years ago. Will we find out the answer one day? Who knows? It depends a lot also on archaeological excavation, in my opinion, because what else can there be? Can we find more chronicles? Well, I have a pretty good idea where they're being stored in one place in Italy, so to say. But let's leave it alone. Let's not guess too much and just hope we do find out more information, and let it be like a warning to our times. I thank you for your attention. If you can support my research, please kindly do so through the links you will find in the description to this channel. And please like my video, please tell others, and I'll bring you more interesting subjects connected to the Eurasian paranormal, but also to the paranormal pertaining to our planet.